Story 1. It seems like it would be a good place to live if everything wasn't so fucking expensive. Story 2. As a Dutchman, I consider Canadians honorary family. I have never been there, but a bond was formed when they, as part of the Allies, liberated us in World War II. I think they are genuinely touched by how much we appreciate them. It goes a bit further than that. The Dutch and Canadians share a similar mindset. They are less British in outlook and more European than people in the United States. It is like a long-distance childhood crush. Even if you are not in a relationship, you will always think of them fondly. I have only heard good stories about Canadians from friends who have been there. Story 3. Canada seems very strange to me. I live in Germany, where the average population density is 237 inhabitants per square kilometer, which is 613 per square mile for those using imperial units. The country also has many small villages and towns, so that average is not due to a single megacity. It is impossible to be more than 3 kilometers away from any human-made structure in most places. Even that distance is achievable only in some national forests and is not encountered normally. Meanwhile, Canada has vast areas with almost no people. People can get lost and sometimes die in the wilderness, which I find completely unimaginable. If someone set me out in the wilderness within a 100-mile radius of my home, I would likely find my way to civilization within 15 minutes. It is unbelievable to me that a country can be so large and largely uninhabited. Story 4. Until recently, Canada and Denmark were engaged in the most polite, harmless war you could imagine over a tiny, inconsequential spit of land known as Hans Island, which both countries claim. Each country sends a squad of troops to the otherwise uninhabited island, plants its flag, respectfully stows the other country's flag, and leaves some liquor behind. Denmark leaves schnapps. Canada leaves whiskey. No shots were ever fired, only gifts left for the other side. Can you think of anything more Canadian? Story 5. I've only been to Newfoundland, but the people there were the nicest I have ever met. Story 6. I have never been, but from what I gather it is nice. A friend of mine went there recently and now he is planning to move there permanently. So I guess, fuck you, Canada, for stealing my only friend. Story 7. As an Aussie traveling around Southeast Asia, I found Canadians, the Irish, and the Dutch shared a similar sense of humor and were my best drinking buddies. Story 8. I love Canada and the Canadian people. The last few years have made me sad for them. Story 9. I am an American National Hockey League fan, so I love Canada. You gave us Sidney Crosby and Mario Lemieux, and without those two the Penguins would not still be in Pittsburgh. Thank you, Canada, for saving my franchise. Story 10. I have never met a Canadian. My whole perspective of them comes from memes, history, and some quirky social media channels. So, they are the reason half of the Geneva Conventions exist. Do not anger them. Apparently they have a complicated history, but today they are polite and relaxed. Maple syrup shows that stubborn people can turn anything into food, so Canadians must be very stubborn. They either hide their unattractive people well or are genuinely attractive. I assume the latter. Their politicians seem about as flawed as ours, I guess. Story 11. As a New Yorker, I have never considered Canadians to be foreigners when they visit New York, and I never felt out of place when I went to Toronto. Some years ago, a major windstorm swept through my town. It was not a tornado, but you would be forgiven for thinking it was. It damaged our power grid. A large crew of linemen from Quebec came to help repair it, and I had the opportunity to feed them lunch. A national example occurred on September 11, 2001, when American planes carrying passengers were allowed to land in Canada without passports. The passengers were given places to sleep, food, and phones to call home. Story 12. Nothing bad to say, really. I haven't met that many yet, but every interaction I've had with Canadians has been pleasant. They are likable people. I'd love to visit the country someday. Story 13. I am from the United States of America. I love everything about Canada, especially the people. Story 14. They are good people. Do not get on their bad side. They can hold their own. Story 15. They are very nice people, but I am a film editor and have cut many features filmed in Canada. I have to say there is a pervasive, fuck it, close enough work ethic on those productions. I do not know if it is like that in all Canadian fields. On the plus side, Vancouver may be the prettiest city I have ever seen, with the mountains wrapping around downtown. Story 16. As a person from Germany, I think it's like a more peaceful, somewhat more European-feeling United States, with geography similar to and a size comparable to Russia. It is full of moose, has Tim Hortons on every corner, and Toronto and Montreal feel like New York. Also, people often forget Quebec and that many Canadians speak Quebecois French. Story 17. My best friend is Canadian, and we have visited several times. This is Toronto, so it is a big city in Canada. I have not been anywhere in Canada beyond Toronto and Vancouver, but it is honestly not much different from big cities in the United States. When traveling internationally, my wife and I are often mistaken for Canadians rather than Americans because we are quiet and polite. My one complaint is that Canadian border agents can be very harsh. I have traveled the world, and I consistently receive the toughest treatment at Canadian border crossings. Story 18. I live near Detroit. My mom's family is from Newfoundland. She was their first child born in the United States. My grandparents came here in the 1920s for work. My grandmother never became an American citizen, though my grandfather did. We used to go to Windsor so my grandmother could get certain Canadian foods she liked. I think Canada is one of our best and strongest allies. They do not deserve these ridiculous rants from Trump. Canada could hurt us by withdrawing energy and other goods they export to us. I hope they do. Someone needs to show Trump he does not run the world. Story 19. I've been there a couple of times. It's odd that you put toppings under the cheese on pizza, but I'll let it slide because you invented hockey. Story 20. As a citizen of the United States, the fact that we have the world's longest unarmed border says a lot to me. Story 21. Scary. Half of the Geneva Convention was written because of Canadians. Story 22. My father, my brother, and I arrived by plane, just barely missing a snowstorm. It began while we were driving into Kenora by taxi. Cars were piled up and we could not get through. As we sat wondering what to do, the driver asked if we needed a place to stay for the night. He and his wife welcomed us into their home for 2 days until we could get back on the road. They were wonderful people and never asked for payment. Story 23. In Brazil, some men in a restroom were speaking negatively about Americans. I eventually had to leave the urinal. It became tense and they asked if I was American. I said no, I am Canadian. They said yes, they love Canada. I am a fan for life. Story 24. Do people really make maple syrup on a stick using snow? I know there is a name for it, but I cannot seem to find it. Story 25. I feel like Canada is the Jennifer Aniston of countries. It's hard not to like Canada and Canadians. Story 26. I am American, born in Alaska. Canadians are generally super cool, but the Canadians I have met disliked Quebec. I have never been to Eastern Canada. Story 27. Overall, a pleasant bunch, albeit pretentious when talking about the United States. Story 28. As an American who has visited the Greater Toronto area many times and dated a Canadian woman, I view Canada as our friendly neighbors to the north. I am always amazed that there are not many massive, glaring differences, but rather many small ones that make Canadians stand out and make you realize you are in an entirely different country. Even in a large city like Toronto, I found people to be more approachable and kind. Story 29. They are simultaneously the nicest people ever and very frightening in war. Story 30. I do not know Jimmy, Sally, or Susie from Canada, although I am certain they are really nice. Story 31. I have not spent enough time there, but every Canadian I have met, whether here or there, has been very likable, hospitable, friendly, and good-humored. I love Canadians and the few places in Canada I have visited. Story 32. The scenery and food on the West Coast are amazing, and Vancouver was beautiful. The mountain hikes were some of the most spectacular sights I have seen, especially with the snow. It has one of the most beautiful natural environments. The population is very diverse, which made the food even better. On the other hand, I was shocked by how severe the drug and homelessness issues were in the downtown area. There were blocks of people wandering and ambulances frequently responding and blocking streets. That impression was cemented when I visited Vancouver. The majority of people are very nice, but I would not say Canada has the kindest people. I encountered a lot of insincere politeness. I also felt I had to be extra careful about misspeaking or commenting on politics and social conditions. The same was true in the United States in places like Seattle. It felt like walking on a tightrope around many people. Friends and family who live there say healthcare is a big issue. They sometimes have to book appointments months in advance, and the level of care can be subpar. I love Canada, but it is not always the winter wonderland people imagine. It has many issues that outsiders may not know about. I would still recommend visiting. Story 33. Historically, it was a great country with friendly people. My impression lately is that it is being overwhelmed by immigration and wokeness to the point that Canadians are losing their culture. I could be completely wrong. That is just the impression I have. Story 34. So much of my favorite music comes from Canada. Spiritbox, Our Lady Peace, Devin Townsend, Billy Talent, and more. Story 35. Canadians are the nicest people I've ever met. But when you put a hockey stick in their hands and skates on their feet, anything is fair game. Story 36. Canada seems amazing with friendly people, stunning nature, and a great quality of life, but I'm not sure I could handle the winters. Story 37. Generally, people are pretty decent to be around, except those from Alberta. I have never met a decent person from there. It seems like the Arizona or Florida of Canada, but not really Canadian, so I have no idea. Story 38. For the past 2 years, I have been working for a large insurance company with offices across Canada and the United States, deploying a new information technology product for the company as a whole. Some offices are small, such as those in rural areas and in the Northwest Territories, while other business units oversee multiple large offices. Having worked with both Canadian and United States offices of various sizes, I can say that the Canadian offices contain many more difficult people than our United States offices. I am not sure if that is an insurance industry issue, but it shattered my stereotype of Canadians with a wrecking ball. Not only do they seem to have more abrasive attitudes, they are much more needy than their United States counterparts. It has been a learning experience for sure. Story 39. Redneck American view. Polite and friendly are two different things. Man, the Canadian Rockies are gorgeous. The only thing comparable is Glacier National Park. As a nurse practitioner dating a Canadian nurse, I find the differences in our health systems profound. The lack of a police officer on every corner, behind every tree, and around every curve is fascinating. I have never seen the Royal Canadian Mounted Police using speed radar anywhere in Alberta or British Columbia. I have never even seen a local police officer. Banff is like Gatlinburg North. Canmore is like Estes Park. Calgary is gorgeous. Story 40. I love Canada and Canadians. I have traveled there from California several times and have had wonderful experiences with the people. Story 41. Canada is my country's dearest friend. I cannot begin to describe how much Canada has aided us. In every war over the past 100 years, they have had our backs. They have been my country's largest trading partner, enabling mutually beneficial exchange of culture, goods, services, and people. The United States would not be who we are without Canada standing behind us. I am proud to have Canada as our neighbor. I am sorry that not everyone in my country feels the same. Story 42. A nice place to visit. I am not sure I would want to live there anymore because Canada has kind of gone crazy recently. I have never met a Canadian I did not like. And fuck your maple syrup cartel. Story 43. As an American, I should visit Canada more. Canadians always seem so cool. I often feel I must apologize as a neighbor because of our political problems. Thank you for Trailer Park Boys, Kim's Convenience, Tim Hortons, poutine, and some truly amazing cannabis. Story 44. I grew up in northwestern New York, and Canada was 20 minutes away. Until I became an adult, Canada seemed much cleaner. Now it is only a little cleaner. Story 45. I was born in the United States but lived in Canada for a few years. I particularly liked Toronto and Montreal. I loved the food, both traditional dishes like poutine and the multicultural cuisine, especially at Market 707. That was the best Filipino food I had. I also enjoyed raclette in Quebec. People there are generally quite polite compared to people in the United States, although the bar is admittedly low. People also seemed a bit more reserved about sharing their private lives, which is understandable. I enjoyed the weather. Being from the South, I had never experienced a true winter until I lived there, and I learned to ice skate that first winter. The nature out west is amazing, especially in Alberta and around Vancouver. Overall, it is a very lovely country and I want to go back. Story 46. It's a beautiful country to visit, and it has given the world some of the finest entertainers. Story 47. As an American living near a major border with Canada, I am proud to be a neighbor. Canada is a beautiful country with rich culture, deep history, and striking landscapes. It is an easy international trip for an American to make. Story 48. Awesome country. Great people, beautiful scenery, spectacular fishing, and incredible beer. Story 49. As a Scotsman, I have always wanted to visit Canada. A good friend moved there and started a family. It seems like a less intense version of the United States. Story 50. I am American. Cannabis is legal there as far as I know. I love hiking. The Canadian landscape is gorgeous. It is not the United States, and I would move there if I could afford it. Story 51. I lived there for 14 years. I always thought they loved Americans, but they did not. I tried, but it was not going to happen. I am so glad to be home in my own country where everyone just hates. Story 52. Every time I hear about Canada, I think of one story. It's a small thing, but once I was injured during a race where you ran as many miles as you could in 36 hours. I twisted my ankle on a rock covered by snow about 4 miles from the next checkpoint. My phone was completely dead and I was crying, partly from pain and partly from self-pity. A man came out of nowhere, calmed me, piggybacked me to where the trail met the road, and called the race director to send someone to pick me up. He refused to continue until I was picked up, even though it cost him time in the race. When I told the race director how amazed I was by the man's compassion, he said, "Well, of course he was nice. He's Canadian." In short, Canadians fit the nice stereotype. Story 53. American. We love you. Open-minded, calm, focused, effective, socially graceful, and extremely relaxed. You are like the sensible sibling trying to manage our alcoholic, troublemaking brother. Story 54. Max respect. They are like the best of America without the worst parts. Story 55. I am an American from the South. I visited Canada for the first time in 2017 and I love it there. It was long overdue, since my ancestors were deported from Nova Scotia to Louisiana about 260 years ago. I prefer the weather. The food was excellent, but the Quebecois were not very pleasant. I did not enjoy dealing with them, but everyone else was lovely. Story 56. It is a beautiful country with kind people for the most part. Story 57. I went backpacking on the Sunshine Coast Trail. The scenery was absolutely beautiful. We took the car ferry. The towns were very clean and felt safe. The people were friendly. I would love to visit again. Story 58. One set of my great-grandparents came to the United States of America from Canada, so I have lately been referring to myself as Canadian American. You are the best neighbors a country could have. Story 59. I live north of a decent swath of Canada. People even think we have a Canadian accent, though I do not hear it. We pick on and argue with each other from time to time, but we stand for your flag and anthem, even sing along and often fly the maple leaf just below it. When the chips are down, we know you have our back. Nobody ever touches a hair on our northern brothers' heads without the full force of everything we can bring to their aid. That is what brothers do. Story 60. As someone from Australia, all the Canadians I have met have been great to talk with and relate to. Story 61. I really like Vancouver, British Columbia. I wish I could visit more often. Story 62. I love it. When I was there in 1986, I had the best time. I know that was a long time ago, but the memories are still great. Story 63. The nicest, most genuinely hospitable people I have ever met. A gorgeous country filled with natural beauty. Much more truly multicultural than the United States. As both an Anglophile and a Francophile, Ontario and Quebec feel like long-lost cousins from across the ocean, which makes me realize they do not always notice the strong British and French influence the way I do. Story 64. The situation is dire. The country is being overrun by Indian students who are often taken advantage of and abused. Because they are treated as a protected class, acknowledging negative impacts when they arrive in large numbers to study and then refuse to leave is often labeled racist. Canadians' natural niceness is being used to make them feel guilty about acknowledging genuine issues, and this is facilitating massive corporations suppressing wages and diploma mills making billions. Everything is very expensive and housing is especially bad. There are people working full-time who live in tents. Almost every house on the market is bought by multimillion-dollar corporations and split into units that each rent for up to $2,000 a month. Story 65. Never been there, but I am sure that 1. Everyone is going to be friendly. 2. It is going to be very cold. 3. People are going to try to make me eat poutine. Story 66. Sometimes you guys can be insufferable online when talking about the United States of America, but I love Canada to death overall. Story 67. I have always thought Canadians were calmer versions of the people in the United States and have felt sorry for them because they are so close to that country. I have never been to Canada, but I would like to visit one day. However, I have absolutely no interest in visiting the United States. It is a beautiful, geographically diverse country, but unfortunately it contains people I would rather stay far away from. Story 68. Opinion of Canada. Long-suffering neighbor of America. If they can tolerate that, they cannot be all that bad. As an Australian, I have always thought Canada is similarly laid back, just colder. Story 69. My opinion of Canada has changed drastically in the last few years. It now faces many of the same immigration issues as Europe and seems to be using the same solutions. I had expected Canadians to be better in this regard. Otherwise, it is a beautiful country with spectacular nature and until recently was quite welcoming. I have no idea what is happening in northern Canada. I assume it is cold there. Canada is very large compared with European countries. Story 70. I came here for work. Other than meeting my wife here, I do not have a lot of good to say about it. I am trying to convince her to leave and take a work transfer to another country. Story 71. This is just what South Park taught me, but I am not sure how accurate it is. Story 72. I went to Vancouver for a wedding. Seaplanes were cool, and the scenery was beautiful. The rest of the city was dirty and felt like the land of the Walking Dead. Actually more disturbing than any Latin American city I have been to. I was in Calgary for work. It was unremarkable and reminded me of any sprawling city in the United States. I went to Montreal for a holiday. It offered a unique city experience, very cool and different from what I expected in a good way. Canadian politics are just as much of a joke as United States politics. Story 73. I heard your train companies have to check you in and weigh your bags. Story 74. A nice country with polite people, unless you are American and they try to drag you into a national pissing contest. That gets old. Story 75. I thought it was great, but after talking to Canadian friends, it is not all it is cracked up to be. Story 76. After spending 1 year in Canada and meeting many Canadians through my job, I can say that the country is full of beautiful landscapes, but the world-famous Canadian politeness is often reserved for Canada and other developed countries. Some of the most entitled, rude, arrogant, and even racist people I have met are Canadians visiting or living in developing countries. Story 77. I love Canada. I have only the best memories of Montreal, Vancouver, and Victoria. Here is one. Back in the early 1980s, I did music for a series of films on hot air ballooning and came to know a professional balloon pilot. He invited me to crew for several days at a festival in Montreal. This involved unloading, chasing, and reloading after flights. During the entire trip, I knew one phrase in French. Excusez-moi, je ne parle pas français. For 3 days we were treated better than celebrities. I did not spend a penny the entire time we were there. At every meal, people bought our drinks and food. We were simply unable to spend any of our own money. I will never forget their friendship and kindness. I wish we in the United States were better neighbors. When I hear those fucking Make America Great Again idiots talking about the 51st state, I get angry. Story 78. I have been to Montreal and Toronto several times. Both cities are very clean. The people are welcoming and friendly. Big thumbs up. Story 79. I visited Toronto. Now I want to live there. Where is my green card boyfriend with poutine? Story 80. I don't have strong opinions. It looks like a nice place. People seem normal from the other side of the world. They haven't done anything to make me dislike them. The culture seems similar to my own. I don't agree with the stereotype that Canadians are always very polite. At the university I attended, about 30 Canadian students in the same degree program were not especially polite. Some were rude and arrogant. Story 81. I think of Canada as a cross between the United Kingdom and the United States. The only thing I know about it is that it is difficult to work for a company in Canada when you are from the United States unless it can be proven that there is nobody in Canada who is qualified to do the work. Story 82. A very international feeling from my visits to Toronto. The metric system and similar conventions. Story 83. I love it, especially Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal, and my favorite, Whistler. Story 84. I am from upstate New York. I use Montreal Pierre Elliott Trudeau International Airport occasionally. I do not use the Transportation Security Administration. I am pretty mellow overall. Montreal and Toronto are both rather nice cities, with Montreal being the closest you can get to a European city in North America. Mexico City, on the other hand, is in a league of its own. It is one of the greatest cities in the world, comparable to New York, London, Paris, Rome, and Tokyo. Story 85. Every Canadian I have ever met has been awesome, and every place I have visited in Canada is beautiful and clean. Canada has free healthcare and strong consumer protections. Canada gets 2 thumbs up from this jealous American. Story 86. I am envious of them. They have a better healthcare system than we do. They are generally more polite and more sane. Story 87. I live in northern Minnesota, so I am pretty much obligated to consider Canadians my cousins. I would not make a fuss if you annexed us. Story 88. Everyone I know from Canada is kind. They are some of the best people I have met in my life. Meanwhile, I am stuck in Florida, where it seems everyone is angry about something and blames others. Story 89. Very nice people, tons of forest, and home to some good chicken. Looking at you, Nando's. Story 90. I live in Maine and have traveled to Canada frequently. I recently took the Rocky Mountaineer train through British Columbia and Alberta. The scenery was stunning and the people were friendly. I wish we lived in Canada because of our current political situation. Story 91. Alabama here. I've only been to Montreal and loved it. I made friends with many people from London. They're genuinely some of my favorite people. Canada gave us the weaker-thans, propagandy, single mothers, and the dirty mill. Fucking love that place. Can't wait to go back. Story 92. United States citizen here. I was on the subway with my wife in Toronto. There was a turn where you really had to hold on. An elderly woman grabbed my shoulder to steady herself. I don't know why that made my heart melt, but it did. Canada is dope. Story 93. They are like that cool, relaxed cousin who treats you well, even though you are a selfish person who does not deserve it. Story 94. I for one love it. When I was 7, I went on vacation to Niagara Falls. It was awesome. I visited a theme park called Clifton Hill and an aquarium. I even rode a boat to the falls, and although the boat tipped and I fell, I enjoyed the experience. Story 95. Banff is one of the most, if not the most, beautiful places on Earth. Story 96. Banff is not a real place. It is just a massive interactive postcard because I refuse to believe reality could be that beautiful. despite adding a day to my work trip to see it in person. It is truly amazing if it were real. Story 97. Pretty mixed. I only know Canadians from professional wrestling. I mean, Bret Hart is cool, but there is also Chris Benoit. Story 98. As an American, I feel my stress levels drop the second I cross the border. Everything feels cleaner and calmer. Story 99. As a Canadian in the United States these days, there is one thing that unites us: our love-hate relationship with the country. Story 100. Nicest, most polite group of savage ninja war criminals since the establishment of the Geneva Conventions, with an impressive public relations team. Story 101. As an American, I always thought of Canada as a magnificent, magical place where the air was clean, the politics were progressive, and the people were always polite. I was disappointed in recent years to read that they can be every bit as ugly as we are. Story 102. America's successful little brother who secretly wants to be like his big brother. Story 103. The United States tried to take over Canada several times in the 1800s. The British had to send troops to guard the United States and Canadian border before the Civil War. After the Civil War, Alaska was purchased to mark the westernmost boundary of the United States after Canada had been taken over. Canada fit right into the big gap between Alaska and New England. Now there is talk of the United States invading Mexico. That has happened before. Once, in 1914, the United States sent ships laden with soldiers and Marines to the Yucatan or nearby. Another time was in 1846 when the United States invaded Mexico and took about half of it, making regions such as Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, and California part of the United States. The United States could have seized even more territory, but that would have looked like it was trying to take over the world. I think of these things when people bring up the topic of Canada. I also wonder why they put the monarch's head on their currency in the 21st century. That seems backward, especially considering the behavior of the royal family. Story 104. I am Australian. Canada is like a cold Australia with worse neighbors. It seems quite calm, but it would be better if they closed their southern and western borders. Story 105. I thank them for hockey, but aside from that I do not think of Canada much. For better or worse, I think Canada is a bit forgettable. It is probably because it is the least foreign country I can think of. Story 106. I am a Michigander. My longtime dream was to move to Ontario. It feels like that dream is dead because the cost of living in Ontario is so high. I will remain in the United States, but I look forward to visiting again and hopefully making friends in Ontario. I love Canada. Story 107. A great country with friendly, upbeat people who are kind to each other. Good healthcare and excellent, diverse cuisine. International cultural diversity. A better place to live than in the United States. A great place to visit, especially British Columbia. It is cold most of the year. The news tends to be more positive than constantly negative. They do not have assholes like our grand old party and Donald Trump. Story 108. As an Australian, I think of Canada as a friendly, easygoing version of the United States with universal healthcare and without widespread gun ownership. Story 109. I have nothing against Canadians. Every time I go up there, they are pleasant enough. I think their money is a little funny, though. I'm sure they have both silly and consequential things they could mock us for. Story 110. I can only speak from my personal experience dealing with Canadians in the United States. Never has a stereotype been more true. You are really cool and very kind. I have yet to meet a jerk. I am sure they exist, but Canadians are consistently pleasant. Story 111. The women are cuter in Canadian cities, so I married one. Story 112. I'm American. I love Canada. It is a great country. However, something should be done about wealthy Chinese buyers purchasing housing in Canada. Story 113. Canadians have a reputation for being very nice. Because they are unusually polite, I sometimes suspect they may have ulterior motives. I am from the South in the United States. Southern hospitality is real, and I was always taught to be polite. However, Canadians seem even more polite than people in the Midwest or the South, which makes me wonder if they are planning something. Story 114. As an American, Canada is one of those countries that seem closely entwined with us. The same is true of Australia, New Zealand, the United Kingdom, and Ireland. We speak the same language, and our cultures are very similar. Yes, I love Canada and Canadians. Story 115. I always tell my kids it's the greatest country on earth. Story 116. I went to Vancouver a while back for work. I stopped by a bar late in the afternoon. It was fairly quiet, but I struck up a conversation with the bartender. He said the regulars would soon be coming in. When they did, he introduced me to a couple who kindly invited me to sit with them. I had a fantastic time. We talked like we had known each other for years. They asked me to come back the following day, which I did. Another friend who had not been there the previous night invited me to a Vancouver Canucks game after learning I was a hockey fan, but I could not accept because it conflicted with a work event. The neighborhood was beautiful, and the women were stunning. Cannot wait to go back. Story 117. I am an American Southerner, but I would side with my northern brothers and sisters in just about any fight they would care to pick. Story 118. I really want to move there so I do not have to worry about going into debt if I develop a medical condition. Story 119. You gave the world and of Green Gables. You can do no wrong. Story 120. Apparently, according to a funny video I saw, even when mugged, Canadians are the most polite people ever. For real, look up Canadian mugging or Canadian robbery on YouTube by Extremely Decent. It is hilarious. Story 121. Canadians are great people. Like everywhere, there are some jerks, but Canadians generally have a culture of respect and tolerance. This is particularly true in the central and western parts of Canada and in smaller towns. Larger cities are more diverse and have a mix of cultures, which in some cases can lead to religious bigotry, but most people I have met have embraced the friendlier Canadian culture. Having lived in the United States, I can say minorities are treated much better in Canada. Story 122. All dressed chips are awesome. I live about 4 hours from Montreal and go up there multiple times a year. I absolutely love it. My French is poor, but I still try. I have never had a bad experience in Montreal or during my few visits to Toronto. Story 123. I would love to visit. From what I have heard, it is a very welcoming country to non-citizens. Story 124. I would love to visit Canada. I imagine beautiful landscapes, friendly people, the occasional Mountie on horseback, and the chance to try maple syrup on a stick and poutine. Story 125. Our cousins in the Americas. We love them here in Australia. Story 126. I went to Montreal for the total solar eclipse. It was a breath of fresh air in affordability compared with New England. I rented a nice hotel for 4 days and ate out every day for a total cost less than the $1,000 a suspicious Airbnb wanted for a single day. Story 127. You guys really like hockey, but you really like Tim Hortons. Story 128. I am American. No apologies. I read far down the thread. I am sad there is so much animus toward us, as we are a good people even though we are often our own worst enemies. I have deep family roots in Canada that go back several generations. I have spent years traveling in your great country, visiting everywhere except Labrador and Newfoundland. I see a country that is still young in its ambition but old enough to feel confident in those ambitions. Canada is not perfect, but it may be the lifeboat of North America. If you are Canadian and feel the United States is dismissive of your place in the world, be patient. We are going to go through a turbulent period and will not be the same on the other side. I have great confidence that Canada will endure and that your federation will be a beacon of freedom. Story 129. I live in Detroit, which is north of Windsor, Ontario. I love Canada, especially Toronto. The city is diverse and the people are friendly. Windsor is so close, and it feels neighborly. Story 130. Lovely place to fly over. The best landscapes I have ever seen from a plane. Story 131. You have great magicians. Sean Farquhar, Chris Ramsey, Wes Barker, Eric Leclerc, and Alex Boyer. Much nicer than the United States, but colder and full of wild animals. Am I correct? Story 132. The healthcare system is good, though American politicians would have you think it is a terrible failure. Story 133. I went to Mexico for my birthday and graduation gift in 2006. We went on a water trip. I can't remember exactly what, but the captain and guide kept calling us Canadians. We were actually from the United States. After every sentence he said, "How about that? Eh?" Every single time. I grew up believing Canadians said that all the time, laughing out loud. Story 134. To me here in Germany, Canada seems like our Rhineland-Palatinate, the Pfalz. His people are nicer than those in the rest of America. Story 135. For me, Canada is the place where people from the United States are fleeing in increasing numbers to escape sexist, racist, and other horrific, often religiously motivated policies. I was not surprised by Canada's role in The Handmaid's Tale. Story 136. I may be the biggest American Canadaphile you will ever meet. Honestly, I would move there, but I cannot take my beloved Milwaukee with me. Going to a Grey Cup with my son is on my bucket list. Story 137. I have never been to Canada. I am from Europe and have traveled and met many Canadians, but I have not been there yet. I should add that I speak French, so my experience would be different otherwise. In my opinion, Canadians are very kind and have a unique perspective on life and the world. They seem different from people in the United States, who are often more optimistic. Canadians feel more realistic and sometimes more pessimistic to me. Canada appears to have a good mix of large cities and vast natural areas, both of which intrigue me and I would like to see. Quebec has a distinctive way of speaking French. I also appreciate the bilingual nature of the country. The Canadian government is a mystery to me, and I do not like politics in general, but it seems more peaceful and society-oriented compared with the government of the United States, which I perceive as more individualistic and inclined toward military action. I have considered moving to Canada in the past, but salaries are lower relative to high housing prices in urban areas. Story 138. I feel sorry for them. Being Scottish, we understand what it is like to have appalling neighbors. I am desperate to visit one day to try to find and watch an ice hockey game. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.